Cool. All right. So, talking about running drills, maybe a little bit about how to choose drills. There's a lot of what I have said will already have come up in the other sessions that we've run, but it will sort of just bring it all together in one place, and we can maybe have a bit of discussion as well. If there's any questions that people have, feel free to try and ask questions. I don't know if I'll see the or where I can see the written questions. So because there's not many of us, just interrupt me. It's fine. Yeah, because I'm quite keen on this not just being me doing all of the talking necessarily. This is all my thoughts and my opinions on what I've picked up from running drills and running trainings, but obviously you've all been to trainings and been part of drills, so that experience is just as valid as being on the coaching side of it, if not more so, because you're the ones experiencing it. So by all means, add your thoughts as we go along. So I first would like you to think a little bit about what a good drill is. I have a few ideas that I'll share, and then I'm quite keen to hear if there's other thoughts that you have. So if you maybe want to take a second and think if you've got a drill that you particularly enjoy doing at training and maybe why you enjoy it, or just some of the more enjoyable trainings you've been at, what maybe links those. And then, yes, I'll give you a minute to think about that for a second. Cool. I think I can sort of see let's start moving so much. So I had a few ideas that I'll go through, and then we'll add on anything else that you've come up with. So a good drill is simple. I think we've all been part of a drill where the coach, with all the best intentions, has come up with this really elaborate flow of this person cuts here and then someone throws to them and then they move somewhere else, and it kind of, you spend the first 10 minutes of the drill just trying to figure out where you're meant to go, and you can't actually focus on what it is that you're trying to learn. So I think simplicity is really great, or if you want to do that really complicated movement, you sort of have to build your way to get there. It's not something you can just jump straight in and do. So I think that simple is a very important part. Adaptable, having lots of layers to a drill is really great. It's something that we focus on a lot when we do our Nexus drills, because we have a wide range of skill. So a wide range of skill can mean that having adaptable drills is really good, but there's also limitations in terms of the weather. If it's windy or raining or cold or something, you might need to change so that people are running more or throwing shorter distances or different things to account for whatever limitation you have on your training or unforeseen circumstances. So it's always great to have layers and have an adaptable drill. Applicable, if you can work out how the drill applies to a game you're going to play, then that makes it much more likely that it will work for you. If you're just telling someone that they need to throw a disc a whole lot, is not much use if they don't actually know when they may use that throw in a game or something else. I've said principles based, or another way of looking at this is kind of giving options. We don't really just want to say you must do things a certain way. A really good example is, I think when you're new, you learn if you're throwing to your left-hand side, you throw a backhand. If you're throwing to your right-hand side, you throw to forehand. If you're right-handed, obviously the opposite if you're left-handed. And that's something that then, like, I know I had to unlearn that I was allowed to throw a backhand either way, or a forehand either way, because sometimes it's just faster to throw a forehand or a backhand, even though it's not the right way that I'd learned when I first started. So it's really good to talk about principles rather than being really prescriptive around what you're telling people to do. Active. So this is not necessarily saying that you can't have a drill where you're stationary, but it's just about the amount of time that people spend in the drill versus out of the drill. And that can be as simple as splitting into 2 drills, or it may be something more complicated than that, but always good to think about how long people are just waiting in line before they take their turn, compared to how long they actually get to be in the drill for. And then drills need to be fun, because people want to enjoy being at training. I think a lot of the other 5 things all sort of link into making the drills fun for people. People enjoying it more if they're doing active more often than they're stationary. They'll enjoy it if they can see how this is going to benefit them in the game. And they enjoy it if they understand it. So I think the most important thing is that drills are fun, and people are enjoying being at training, because that's why we play Frisbee in the first place. So those were just 6 ideas that I've come up with. So I don't know if people had other ideas for what makes something a good drill that they want to add to the list. Feel free to say out loud.
I had some thoughts about but we were actually talking about like specific drills, like which drills we like. But I think the concept of some of those were that they're good for a warm up. So like warming up your throws before a game. So for example, just a simple brickside throw up and brickside drill, and what was I saying? I was saying the Swiss drill, which might be called something different in this part of word. But it just kind of wants you for the sharp cuts, like that you are not doing banana cuts. So I think it's good for beginners as well, to show them the kind of direction of cutting, and because you can do it both for shorter cuts and like undercuts and then deep cuts as well. Probably it's like, you know, what you were saying about adaptable as well. So it can be used for both kinds of throws as well, and obviously both backhand and forehand.
Anything else? Tara's house?
I think that we kind of talked about very similar things to what you said already in your like brainstorming things. For me, like the applicability one was really important, because when we're doing a drill and I can like see how it relates to a game, then the intensity that I like bring to the drill I feel is like raised, because I'm like, oh, I can like see how this works and like how I need to play. Whereas when it's just like how it fits in, even though I know they're like some drills are important, even though they're not like directly applicable, in my head I just find it harder to like raise intensity. So it was very similar to what you've already said, but that was what my 2 cents was. But
yeah, I was like kind of the same with you already said, but I like simple drills, like the bread and butter one, where you can like start off really simple and then build it up and then just keep changing it around, and just add in different things all the time to change it up and make it better.
Any thoughts? You didn't get your minute to think, Becca. Do you have any thoughts?
No, I was going to say something similar to that last point, I think, where you can build on something, you know, start simple, but throughout a season, sort of add in different aspects and make it more complex.
Cool. Good. Glad I covered most of it. So I'll talk a little bit about some different types of drills, and then we'll and then how to explain drills, and then we'll maybe see if we can think of some drills that might work for different situations. So this is skills versus concepts. So this is something that I think, not everyone will agree, but I think it's good to think about. When I'm running a training, I often think about whether I'm trying to cover off something that's a skill or something that's a concept, because I think they need to be treated quite differently. For me, a skill is really about repetition. If you want to learn how to throw, you have to throw hundreds of throws. And you can throw them in different circumstances, but at the end of the day, it's just going to be lots of repetition of throwing lots and lots of throws that's going to help you get to the end point where you can throw quite well. Versus a concept, which I think you initially need to start with the skills that people will need to complete it, but in the end you will, I find you need to progress to a point where the drill gives them a near game situation to actually make the decisions. I think that's what it is. Concepts for me will often include a decision. So as much as you need to choose which throw to use, when you're just learning how to throw a forehand, you just need to throw lots of forehands. When you're doing a handler reset, for example, which would be a concept, it's more about making that decision to turn or not turn, or to continue and clear out, and those sorts of things that will distinguish you between someone who's good at handler resets and someone who's bad at handler resets. You can be, and there's a skill in there in terms of being able to change direction quickly, which requires repetition, but at the end of the day, you can be very, very good at changing direction and also not very good at handler resets if you don't make that decision. When we do handler reset drills, we often build up and we work first on the cutting shapes that we might use, and then we tend to bring in defense so that people actually have to make that decision. And I think it's good to, when you're choosing drills, to figure out whether you think you need to focus on the skills or the concepts, and that may be that one training you focus on the skills so that the next training you can focus on the concepts, or if you're already at quite a high level, you can just jump straight in with, you all have the skill level you need, you just need to focus on that concept, which generally comes down to decision making. So I thought I would just bring that up because it's important for, when you're choosing which drills you want to do for different situations. And one drill that is very good for concepts is the idea of focused games. So this is something that Eva brought up in her session, and I think EJ brought up in her session as well, where you have game-like situations, but you may change a variable so that you're focusing more on one thing or the other. And these are fantastic for developing decision-making in different concepts and understanding of different concepts. Because you are forced to practice under pressure, you'll have genuine defense marking you, or genuine offense trying to score on you, which means that you have to work under normal game-like pressure scenarios. You have to practice making decisions, which is a huge part of those concept type skills, or not skills, the concept parts of trainings where you want to learn different concepts, and that comes under zones and structures, strategies and things. When you're, at the end of the day, the ability to make decisions within those structures is what will determine the success of your team. So you get to practice making decisions and making them under pressure. It's very easy to transition from a focus game to a normal game, which gives them the opportunity to have this slightly artificial environment, which forces them to maybe work more on that concept. And then by transitioning to the normal game shortly after, you can see if they can actually take that concept and use it under normal circumstances, or if you need to focus on it for longer. I also love them because opportunities are endless. There's so many, you can change any variable in a game to create a new focus game which will focus on something different, which is so I've got some examples coming up, but there's just no limit to what you can work on while working on with these focus games, and it's much easier than coming up with other drills generally. And then it's always really fun, which I said was really important for a drill. I think it's basically just playing frisbee, which means that people sometimes forget that they are in a training scenario and they can play games, and everyone just loves playing frisbee. That's why we all come to training. That's why we all show up. So the more you can make it like frisbee, the more enjoyable it is for people, I find. So I've got some examples. So you can have 8 defenders, which is an offensive focused drill, working on, you've got an extra defender, so there's going to be someone poaching, so it helps you with identifying poachers or identifying unusual defenses. You could have 6 defenders, which forces you really to rethink how you play defense. You can no longer just play a one-on-one matchup, and you have to think about how you can help each other out. You can do a shorter stall count to encourage quick movement of the disc. Double score if you really want to focus on your end zone play. Unlimited stall count, which is one that we've used when we've tried to work on resets. So once you've got an unlimited stall count, so there should never be a turnover, because you can always just throw the 100% pass and wait for it to come. And then things like 5-pull or 1-shot, which force one team to constantly play defense or one side to constantly play offense, and they can and really puts pressure on people to complete the scoring passes in one turn rather than having lots of turnovers. It can help just with a bit of focus there on defense or on offense. So there's a lot of other ones. Has anyone got any other focus games that they've played that they think are quite useful?
I was just thinking that when you were saying like why are they good, is I also like them because they provide feedback to the team as well, in terms of, because you are focusing on something specific. So you might see that otherwise your offense was working, but when you added that something specific, then it was working less. So yeah, it can just give very, very good feedback, I think, to see like what they might need to work on more.
Yeah, and
we played quite a lot of we played quite a lot of double score with chicks last season, with some penalty burpees in between, and it definitely encourages you to make less mistakes as well and really play a safe game.
Yeah, it can be a fun way, maybe not quite the right word, but a good way to incorporate fitness into the session, especially early on in the season when everyone's coming back off from the off season. I know there's been ones where people play, I think you run a shuttle at the end zone. If you get scored on, you have to sort of run back to the other end zone and do a shuttle at the other end zone, and then you have to play offense while now exhausted from doing a sprint. So there's an element of penalty for being scored on, and also you build your fitness, I guess, and then playing when tired. So
playing exhausted. Yeah.
So there's lots of different. You can change anything about the game, from stall count to number of people to rule. Adding in extra rules like double score. There's so many things you can do. So it is a really great tool for learning, especially concepts. Obviously, if you're struggling to throw, then you'll struggle to throw in any situation. So sometimes it's necessary to build those skills first. But if you've got a team that has those baseline skills, then you could, in theory, run an entire season where you did only focused games, and be very successful, I'm sure. Not that I've tried it yet. Maybe I will one day.
And I think I just had one more thought. Another one is where probably with less high-level teams, but when you try to incorporate, like making sure that everyone touches the disc. So what is it?
We call it the rainbow points when you try to
rainbow points. So yeah, just making sure that everyone touches.
I really
so
like that name. I really like that name. Did you say rainbow points?
Yeah, that's how I heard it. That was one of the rules in one of the beach hat tournaments. Oh, let's play rainbow points to ensure even the very beginner newbies play and touch the disc, not left out.
Yeah, that's cute. We also played in our mixed team recently that boys had to throw to girls and girls had to throw to boys, which was quite cool.
Yeah.
It mixed up the game a bit because people had to think through when they were cutting and where they were throwing.
Yeah. I mean, aside from the obvious of seeing the other gender, which we maybe aren't so good at when we start playing in our men's and women's teams, it's a great way to think about timing your cuts. Even if you wouldn't always time them specifically for one group of people, it forces you to think more, and by thinking more you will develop that ability to time your cuts well under different circumstances too. It's pretty fun. Cool. So we'll next part was just thinking about how you we've talked a little bit about what makes a good drill and the sorts of drills that we can use. So then you need to work out, but before you can really choose your drill, you need to work out what you need to cover. So I stole this from, I think it's a UX thing, user experience thing, which is not not my area of expertise. So I may get this wrong, but Becca can correct me. But it's a way of how to build your training or your drill and work out what you want to cover and how to do it. So the first thing is to work out broadly what you need to cover, and depending on your circumstances will depend on how you do this. So if you're maybe for Nexus, we often have feedback at the end of each season, so we'll use that feedback and possibly discuss as the coaches that from last season about how things went and what we think we needed to work on. I'm sure Blueberries will have a similar thing, and Chicks and all our club teams tend probably be quite similar. And then whereas if you have our schools team, for example, then it may work to get sort of teachers and parents involved, because children, depending on how young they are, may not be as good at kind of articulating how they felt about the season, but through conversations that they had with their parents after games, the parents may have some insights that could help you as well to work out what didn't work well or what isn't working well during a season. And I think it's really important. This is something I think that as I've seen coaches do well, and I think it's a really important thing to think of doing, which I had definitely not thought of doing until about last season, which is actually checking in regularly, partway through a season, checking in with your team, or providing a way for them to, trying to have some sort of almost open door policy, as it were, where they can provide feedback throughout the season so that you can be constantly getting an idea of what is working, what isn't working, and just getting more eyes looking at what needs to be focused on for the team. So then once you have kind of an idea of these general things that are working, it's about working out what the important things are. So which things were mentioned more often. Maybe one person said, I didn't know how the end zone worked, but the rest of the team have all said, we know how the end zone works, but we don't understand how zone works. And so then, that kind of, there's an element of majority rules probably, which will play into it, particularly if you're looking at the wider team training. And I said, release your inner toddler, because I think you need to just continuously ask yourself why is that the case. So, maybe one piece of feedback was that we weren't very good at defense. Well, why weren't we good at defense? Maybe we were struggling to stop the unders. Why were we not able to stop the unders? Because we were out of position. Why were we out of position? Because we were poaching. Why were we poaching? Because other people were getting beaten deep. Why were they getting beaten deep? So, you can kind of continuously keep asking yourself, why was that the case? Until you kind of get to what you think is actually the core problem. Maybe the core problem is a fitness and athleticism thing, maybe the core problem is not knowing how to position yourself on defense. Maybe the core problem is that you struggle with focus, and so you're fit and you're quick and you're agile and you start in the right place, but then your player starts moving and you're off looking at something else. So there's so many different reasons why it could be an issue, and it can be really hard to delve into exactly why it is, especially on a team level. On an individual level, maybe less so, but on a team level it can be quite hard, and sometimes maybe it will take a couple of sessions, or you might have to come up with a couple of possible options and train both of them because you just don't know exactly why it is. Or maybe you go back for a second round with the people that you spoke to. So you're saying, we've identified that defense is an issue. I'm not sure whether it's the fact, bad positioning, or if it's a fitness issue. Talk to the other coaches. What do you think? Do you think we are lacking fitness and athleticism, or should we focus on our positioning, or should we focus on both? But yeah, I think it's always good to just keep asking why, so that you can really tailor the training and the drill that you're doing to the team you're talking about, instead of just reusing and recycling a drill that you did with this other team, or that you've done 100 times but obviously isn't working because you're still struggling. So once you think you've figured out why, you can start thinking through how might we fix that? How might we train people to do that? And I think it's in the article I read, and I think they were right, it's good to just kind of let your imagination run wild, go crazy with it. An example of an absolutely nuts idea might be, let's fly the team to Australia and we'll watch Ellipsis play, because they've been on the top of Australia for several years now, so they're they're very great players. So if we could all go and just watch them, then, or if we could go and play against Australia all the time, then maybe that would help us. Financially probably not viable, but it's great to just sort of think about different ideas, and even less insane ideas just within your training. Maybe we all just spend an entire training running laps of the field because we think our fitness is not up to scratch. It's crazy in a no one wants to do it kind of way. But then you can maybe bring that back into incorporating fitness into training in a way that's not quite so unbearable for most people. There'd probably be one person in the team who would actually enjoy it, but I would not be that person, so I would never run a training like that. But yeah, just think of different things that you might be able to do, and then figure out what's realistic later. So once you have your ideas of how you might go about learning different things, you can start bringing it back to reality maybe. It's probably not feasible for us to go fly over to Australia all the time, but maybe we can watch footage from games, and we can analyze game footage together. That might be a thing that we can do as a team. That's something we could feasibly do. I know it's a thing that I have done with teams before, and that's still a great way to learn, but it just doesn't require 20 people flying to Australia. And things like the burpees as a penalty for getting scored on, so people aren't likely to keep coming back if we make trainings, running laps of the field for an hour. But if we incorporate burpees as a penalty, then they can see it helps them. It both encourages not having turnovers, but it also people can get a little bit fitter while still getting some frisbee in, which is good. And then I think the most important thing is actually just to do it. So it can be a little scary showing up to training with a drill that you've made up. I know I've definitely made up drills, and those are probably the most nerve-wracking trainings. I was talking to Tara and Becca at the start, saying that I was some of the times I get most nervous are when I'm kind of doing something for the first time and I don't really know if it's going to work. But at the end of the day, it's important to realize that teams, one, often may not even notice, and two, we're all doing it together. Where even, you know, being coach can be a bit intimidating, maybe standing in front, having everyone looking at you, expecting things, but the team is there for you as much as you're there for them. So just try it, and if it doesn't work, that's where the adaptability comes in, where you give yourself a plan B in case things don't go the way you planned. Cool. Does anyone have any questions on that before we move on? We good? Good. Sweet. So now that we've got a drill, we need to explain it. And if I can find the right tab. Wait, I lost it. One moment. Cool. I just need to share a different screen. Ooh, broccoli. All right, I just want to show this quickly. Because I think this is a great start to a drill. So I can't see you all, but I'm hoping you can hear this. Please shout out if you can't.
Today we're working on the dump swing. The dump swing is a way to move the disc from one side of the field to the other without needing to take a risky throw. The goal is to be able to move the disc from sideline to sideline and take advantage of the defense before it's able to react. We need an offensive strategy that will...
That's the bit that I wanted to show. I just really like this because I think when you're starting a drill, one thing that's so important, which I've played on plenty of teams where this hasn't always happened, and it's quite frustrating, is that you always have to start with why you're doing this. I think it's especially as adults, you're used to knowing why you're doing things. You tend, and it's that applicability thing as well. Like Tara was saying, it really can up the intensity when people know why they're doing the drill and how it's going to help them improve as a player, or how it's going to help the team play better together. Then it's just going to increase the intensity of how they play, and they'll be more willing to give it a shot if they know why they're doing it. So I really liked that part of the video where he just at the very beginning of the video, he just says, we're going to learn dump swing because it's really useful to be able to move the disc from one side of the field to the other and attack new parts of the field while the defense isn't ready, and to do that without taking risky passes. And I think that's something that we miss really often. When I know definitely I did early on when I was running drills, I would jump straight into, this is what we're doing and this is how you do it and this is what the drill looks like. But at no point did I explain why we were doing what we're doing. And I think that's a really important thing to do. Just to get buy-in from the team, and yeah, with adults and with children, they just want to know why they're doing things. That's why toddlers ask why. And a second thing that's quite important is to avoid jargon. And this will be on a team by team basis. That's why I said know your team. A lot of people will know what an end zone is, for example. I recently found myself explaining Frisbee to brand new players, probably for the first time in a long time. And I had to first explain, this box at the end of the field is where we can catch to score, because end zone didn't mean anything to them. So there'll be a level. If you don't know the team at all, I think it's really good to start and just assume they don't know anything. So you're not talking about roll curve, you're not talking about inside out, you're not talking about deep and under, and end zone. It's all just 100% language that people would use outside of Frisbee. And then as you develop a relationship with the team, you'll learn what they do and don't know, and then you can start using the words that they do know. And you can incorporate jargon as long as you explain what it is. I think it's really easy to forget all the weird little quirky words that we use as Frisbee players, and just take it as common language. And then you speak to someone who doesn't play Frisbee and you realize that we have this entire language of our own that they don't know. Context. This is similar to starting with why, but it's really important to explain the context of the situation that people would want to use this particular skill or concept in. Even just letting them know where the end zone is can be really big. Like, you can have this incredible drill that you lay out flawlessly, but people don't know if they're on offense or in defense, or what they should be focusing on. So then it all it all falls apart without the context of the game. Am I on offense or defense? Where am I trying to score? Have I just caught the disc, or am I picking it up from a stationary play? Are we in the middle of flow? There's lots of different elements that can play into the situation that people are in, which will then help them to make those decisions about how they want to react, or help them to know why this is useful in a game. I always like it to use an example, so get people to actually go out and run through the drill for you, which can be, which just helps people to understand what the drill is meant to look like. I also find that's a really useful way to get people involved who maybe aren't otherwise involved all the time, and help people feel like a part of the team. And so I'll generally try not to use the same people every time. Define success. There's two parts to this. This one helps people to understand what the real purpose is. So defining success, you can try and be quite general about it, which adds to that principles-based concept. So instead of if you especially when you're focused on defense, for example, getting a D may not be a realistic way of defining success. But if you're able to get the stall count to above 5 or 6, or if you're able to make the thrower make 2 fakes, then that's success. It helps people to focus on what you want them to focus on, and to feel successful even when they don't get those really obvious successes. It also helps with the layering, so you can define success in different ways for different people, which means that maybe the more skilled people, if you're a more skilled defender, you might be aiming to completely shut down your player, or if you're a new player, then perhaps your goal is to just be nearby when they catch the disc. So it can help you to have those layers for different skill levels, or if the wind isn't a factor, then maybe you redefine your success for that training. And one thing that we always have to do at Nexus, for sure, and I hate it when I don't get given this, is to know what the transition is. So at the end of one rep, where do I go? I always find it's really useful if there's a starting point for the disc and a finishing point for the disc. If the person who ends up with the disc goes back to the throwing line, then that just simplifies everything for me, because then you don't have discs being thrown around unnecessarily. But otherwise, transitions can be pretty much anything. But it is good to think about them beforehand and to tell people what they are, because otherwise they will ask. And I think when you're explaining a drill, it's always good to invite questions. It's inevitable that at some point when explaining a drill, you'll forget some crucial piece of information, even with the best laid plans, and you might prepare really well and have everything written down, and then you get there in front of the people and you forget to tell them whether they're on offense or defense or what the focus is. And so it's always good to just invite questions and let that come out, and then within that you can, if you get a lot of questions, or if you have a team with lots of questions, you may need to find ways to kind of get them to, say, oh, that's a good question, I can answer that to the side while we get the drill started, because obviously it can lead to a lot of questions if you're not careful. But for the most part, the questions that come out when I ask for questions are things that I had every intention of saying and just forgot. So the team will let you know if you've given them enough information, which is good. Cool. Any thoughts on that, questions on that before we move on?
I really like the defined success thing. That's cool, and how it doesn't have to be the same every drill. I remember Geordie came and helped Berries with defense one time and was really good at that. He was helping do a drill on man defense, and sort of taught me about the game at the same time. Was sort of saying, don't have to take everything away, and those sort of concepts about defense that helped with the drill, but also generally in life as well. And it's cool that you wrote it there, because it's it can help make a drill really successful, I think.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I really I was sort of half thinking it but didn't know how to word it. I think defining success in a drill can be a really good way. I think defense is a classic, because it's so easy to feel like you're not successful on defense if you don't get a turnover. But it works on offense too. But to define success in a drill is also a way of sort of subtly educating on what you think the success in a game looks like as well. So then and that can kind of flow through into people understanding when they're doing well and when they're playing well in a game as well. Cool.
I also like the transition part. I think that's also very important when you are, for example, like I was just particularly thinking about like a handler reset, and just knowing that wherever you go after, like once you receive the disc, or if there is an upline cut and you receive it on the line, and just realizing, because sometimes like we don't really pay attention to what's going to happen afterwards, but basically just emphasizing that, for example, that one is basically opening up all the space, and it would be obviously good if if you, for example, like you have a long cut, a deep cut, so getting ready for that, so you don't have to throw that, but when you receive the disc and just getting ready for that, so like knowing which way you are going and knowing where your next ideal option would be, even without throwing that disc, and just doing a fake, which can also it's just practicing as well, like a fake throw as well.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right. So we may use this later, though we could just. No, we started quite late. Maybe we will do. We want to think quickly about some skills or concepts that are important for teams to learn. There's lots of things, but if you just throw out a few and we'll write them down for later.
Hand reset, most important.
Oh, most important. Okay, I'll put it at the top.
One of the classics for me, I think, is like, oh my gosh, what do you call it? On defense, when you're putting a force on, if like I didn't understand why you put a force on or what you were doing, and it makes it very confusing. And as soon as someone was like, "You're making them throw it there, so that the downfield will mark on that," I was like, "Oh wow,
Okay, yeah."
Oh.
Yeah, it took me ages. I think it took me about 3 years to fully understand forcing and the purpose behind it. It's a really good one.
Yeah. Any other quick ideas?
Sharp cuts.
Cuttings, there are so many different ways of cuttings to get free.
Yeah, Cutting is a huge one. You can spend ages on cutting.
End zone plays.
Zone plays.
Getting out of the line.
Cutting off the side from the sideline, or
Getting like out of the line. Yeah. Swinging. So like swinging.
off the sideline.
Verticals.
Jump and swing is the.
I just went.
Upswing. And the one that I have covered is reading high discs. Cool.
And had some using the space.
Yeah, which is a very, like, the broader you go, the harder it is to describe, but that is still so important to work out how to use the space. Cool. So I've done a quick idea of some, like, I've done like a personal brain dump of like brainstorming reading high discs as an idea, and then I thought we could have a go. There's not too many of us, so maybe we'll just do it with us. I was thinking of doing groups, but we'll just go with us. So choose the one that you like the best, and then we can fight over which one we do. But it's going away in 3, 2, 1.
Oh my god.
So something I thought about was catching high discs. So this one came to me because I've played with a couple of teams where we've had tournaments, and then at the end of the tournament, coaches or leadership have discussed and said we were regularly getting beaten on, you know, they would put up a random huck on stall 9 and it always came off because they would beat us in the air. So we need to really work on our ability to catch or read high discs. So you've got just thinking about what are some skills that we might need to build up to get to that point. And depending on your team may depend on how much of this you need to do. So I mean, it's just, you have to be able to jump. You know how to catch over your head. Often you're doing it one-handed, so catching one-handed, actually reading the disc and knowing where it's coming down, and then safely entering contact, or even just feeling secure to enter contact, which is, you know, having the confidence to enter contact, I guess, is part of it. But one way to develop that confidence would be to practice safely entering contact. So I came up with some basic skill level drills that we could do. So we could just do jumping safely and with power, so practicing landing with your knees in the right places and all those sorts of things, which is so important for women, especially with our tendency to ACL injuries, for example. Doing single leg jumps and practice lifting your hand up while you're jumping. Some of this stuff probably won't be applicable to club level, but I think definitely if you've got school level girls, these sorts of things are just things that they may actually never have done before, or people that haven't played a lot of sport for sure. So then you can do catching in pairs, and you can say everyone catch with one hand, everyone catch with your offhand, or practice throwing the disc higher so that they have to catch over their head. One thing that I think I think it'd actually be really great to do with even with Nexus, I am kind of inclined to do, even though this was initially something I heard about for intermediate level age girls, so you know, like 11-year-old girls, but I think it could work at all levels. It's just having, you know, if the coach stands on a chair and holds the disc up quite high, and you just have to run up and catch it, and you have to practice jumping as high as you possibly can and coming down with the disc. I actually think that would be really useful. And then you could do pop passes, you know, just trying to throw the disc up, even doing it to yourself, pop passes by yourself. And then get someone running and throwing the disc high, so they have to move forward and catch the disc. And this is for safely entering contact. It's part of the FIFA 11 warm-up, but it's sort of just jumping into each other and bumping your shoulders or bumping your hips, and then landing safely at the end, which is great for warming up, so that you can reduce your knee injury risk, but also if someone is not confident going in, then it may give them the confidence to go into contact. And maybe just do that where both players just have a disc in hand and they just jump up with one, either touching or arm not touching and catch the disc, and bump shoulders at the same time. And then this is sort of some more drill type ideas in terms of getting more into the concept. And this is sort of just the ways that you can think about drills. It's good to think about what's the benefit of that drill, what's the limitation of that drill, and what are some options that maybe would remove the limitations that you've identified. So for example, holding the disc up to be caught is great because it's safe. There's no contact involved. It's going to be consistent because the disc isn't moving, so you can just hold it as high or as low as you need to, and you can tailor it to different people. So if I've got Eva jumping, then I'm going to hold it as high as I can. If I've got Becca jumping, I might bring it down a little bit. And then the limitations of it is that there's no pressure because there's no defense. They don't actually have to read the disc, so we're removing the reading the disc element and only working on the other aspects, because the disc isn't even moving. So some options might be, to do 2 people jumping for the disc, or to make it a pop pass instead of holding it up, for example. But obviously those will remove some of the benefits we have of it being consistent and being safe, depending on the situation. And at any point, this one's a great one. We actually tried to do this with Nexus a little bit, and we did the attacking high discs where we were passing in pairs and just trying to attack the high disc, and we played a bit of skybox, and also running onto a huck. So 1 person throwing a huck and 2 people running onto it, and attacking it. And at every point we ran into the limitation of wind. So I think we almost always need to have a plan B for wind in Wellington. Auckland and Christchurch might not be quite the same, but it's always good to be aware of what the limitations are if it's windy or raining or cold, or to be aware of what the weather might do, and how it might make the plans less viable. And I think so with those throwing ones, especially some of the options like running onto a huck, one of the options is to have a single thrower. If you've got, we had Peter and Riley who were helping out at our trainings, so we got a little bit more consistency by having them doing all the throws, so they could warm up and get used to what the wind was doing, which meant that the throws were more or less the same each time, so we had a bit of consistency there, and we could really just focus on the running onto the disc. So you can do a lot of brainstorming, a lot of thinking of things, and I think that's a really good idea whenever you're planning a training, is to just write down the ideas, figure out what is good about some of them, what the limitations are. There will be pros and cons to everything, and then you just have to make a decision about what you think is the best way forward for your team. Cool. So we don't have breakout rooms. We probably won't spend 8 minutes on this, but we had those ideas we brainstormed just before, so I thought it might be good to just pick one and have a quick talk about the base level skills that we need to develop to start doing it, and then maybe if everyone wants to try and have a think of a drill that they would use. So I'll go back to the page. You've got pairs. Becca, you can do it by yourself. Just pick one of the skills that we had, and have a quick chat in your pairs, and Becca, you can think by yourself. And then we don't have long, we'll go 3 minutes, and then in 3 minutes you can give us a quick breakdown of the skills you think are required, and maybe one drill that you might run. So go for it.
Hey Marah, can you go back to the other page with the limitations, the table you had earlier? Thank you.
That's great. So we'll just do one more minute. Cool. Anyone want to share what they were talking about or thinking about?
We can share.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We chose sharp cutting as the thing, skill or concept, and we wrote it down. So, but we had that within sharp cutting, you want to improve turning, acceleration, confidence in your cuts, and resetting at the end. There's just something we found today. We're very, I don't know. Sometimes you finish your cut, you don't know when to finish and then what to do afterwards. We thought that was important. Then drills that we came up with were bread and butter, but like focusing on the sharp cut and then accelerating out of it rather than necessarily the throw, even though the throw is important, and Hollywood squares. And then this like triangle drilly thing that Becca can probably explain better than me.
You just kind of had 3 cones in a triangle, and it was more of a marking drill that you'd have 2 people and 1 person was just trying to get to the other cones and just run, and you were just running consistently for a couple of minutes. And the other person was just trying to mark them and stop them getting to. But there was no disc. It was just really quick change of direction and working on that.
So we thought that limitations with bread and butter is that it's quite structured and not very, like it's not super game-like potentially, and that there's no mark, but you could add the mark in, guess. So we thought for Hollywood squares, again, it's like very structured and not necessarily something you'd do in the game, but then the benefits of it is that you're getting your like knees used to, or like getting used to changing direction probably safely using like chop steps and whatnot instead of breaking your ankles as you like try and turn. And then for the triangle drill, we thought it was very good because it's like getting you agile and like used to moving not necessarily in a super structured way, so potentially more game-like, but then less game-like because you don't have a disc involved. But maybe that's a good thing because then it gives you time to focus on the thing.
Yeah, you've been to enough of my trainings. You always win me over with Hollywood squares. I think that I have tried and failed to implement Hollywood squares as a normal part of warm-up several times. Yeah, all of those things are great for offense and defense in terms of footwork. So yeah, with sharp cutting, definitely focusing on the footwork part can be a great first step in developing those skills. Either other?
Cool, I could go.
Yep.
I decided I would do handler reset.
Fair enough.
Predictably. So I thought the skills are sort of broken into 2 parts, isn't it? With the skill set, you've got the thrower who needs to be able to throw well and do good fakes and communicate physically with the other offender and also make good decisions. And then the cutter who needs to be agile, have decisive body motion, and be able to move quickly and cut quickly as well. And the physical sort of faking out their defender and also the physical communication with the person who's throwing the disc. So I thought it was funny to sort of summarize that the biggest skill overall was communication, both between the two offenders, and then both offenders are trying to sort of do fake communication with their defenders, so that they can get free. So I thought, going crazy in my ideation, it could be cool to have a drill where you're sort of trying to fake out or do what you can and both you're throwing and you're sort of cutting, or just in a stationary position to try and do things physically that make the defender or the opposition think you're doing something. So sort of just playing around by looking at people's facials and eyes, or maybe just shoulders and that sort of thing. I guess 3-man drill type situation, but playing around with what you can communicate without actually talking or moving.
Cool. I haven't heard of that one. That'll be fun. I look forward to your training session.
We were talking about end zone and end zone drills. So obviously it's a good opportunity to be organized for an often stressful situation, because many times that's where turns happen, and that's where probably we less likely we want that to happen when we are so close to score. And when the team has a particular call, then obviously then everyone knows what should we do. And drill ideas or options, actually, we thought about that. We can do it with our defense, or we can add defense. If we are talking about the end zone drill particularly, then we can start from midfield or from the side as well, or basically with any other drills as well. We can start to this static or not static. And limitations, we talked about how the end zone drill, you always cut the same direction. So we are practicing that, but it might be a limitation as well. And man defense, so we don't really adjust enough to the opponent's defense, and in the game situation they might have figured it out, they might be poaching, so obviously that can be added to the drill as well, but it's mainly focuses on offense, so I don't think we do that often. Is there anything else about it? There are several options when I said starting, but there is the end zone drill to practice, and you can just practice particular calls as well, like Moses and or zip, whatever it's called, and ISO as well.
ISO is a good one I think to practice, like everyone, not only one person to be good at. It's good to bring confidence to anyone when someone calls a name, because there will be some situation when someone I feel will be more ready, in a better position to do it. So I think that's good as well to practice this. Normally it's an easy way. I wouldn't say easy, it's get to practice, but to have a score as well when you call a name on someone to score.
Yeah, I really like that. I definitely, a lot of teams like to use ISO, but you obviously have to get everyone familiar with it in the first place. And I really like the idea. I've definitely played on a team before where the coach actively encouraged the defense to try poach, because when you're training as your own team, you know what the offense is meant to be doing. So you can try and poach as if the team has figured out what's going on, and then you have to deal with that situation too. So I think that's a really good idea too, and a great way of dealing with that limitation. Obviously, once the team has the basics down, a lot of it is you can start with the basics and then you figure out this limitation and you can add that in once the basics are learned. And it can be a really good way to kind of move on to the next level and kind of keep using the same drill for more of the season, but continue developing as a team. Cool. So that was us. Are there any final questions or thoughts, or anyone got anything before we finish?
I have one question, but it's kind of I don't know if that's really a good question, but when you're like doing drills that just be like handler resets and you're more focused on the handlers practicing whatever they're supposed to be practicing, then when you add in defenders to like just say make it more game like, what like kind of instruction do you give to the defenders? Are you like because obviously they know what the offense is trying to do and like where they want to move, so I don't know, what do you do?
So it can depend. Sometimes I guess it depends. Sometimes you may have an in-between step where you say sort of, 50% defense or 80% defense or something. So you're saying you're there so that if the person just doesn't move, they don't get the frisbee. They have to actively make a cut. Or if the thrower throws the disc too far, doesn't throw a leading pass, then you can D it. But you're not actively trying too hard to defend, which I think can be a good halfway house. Yeah, so something like 70-80% defense. People generally use high-ish percentages, but not quite 100. And then, like I said, with that poaching idea, I think it's really good at some point to get to the point where you do practice with the defense can do whatever they think is the right option, because at some point, most teams you play against will figure out what your offense is. So you need to practice playing against defense that knows what your offense is. But obviously, you only do that once you get to the point where you're comfortable playing that structure with weak defense on. So I think so sometimes it can be just a matter of having the body there. Maybe you say that they can't get a D, even if it comes straight at them, they're not meant to D it. And it just kind of gets the offense used to having extra bodies in the way that they have to think about.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it would be good to sort of establish a language around it. I guess percentages is a good enough communication tool, but it would be nice if everyone was on the same page when you're first learning it. That everyone's sort of going a little bit easy, and then you ramp it up slowly and eventually get to a point where you're poaching and doing everything you can to stop them. As I tend to be quite lazy when I'm at training when there's, when a focus is on offense and I'm just being one of the defense. That can't be a shock to you. I tend to sort of go pretty easy on defense, thinking, the aim is to learn the offense well before we go hard out. But then if no one says play really hard D, then I don't do it, which isn't a good solution either.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teams will have their own language that they develop around it. So as a coach, you can set what your language is. Maybe you can use a traffic light, where red is basically just walking next to them, and amber is jogging and trying to be a bit in the way, and then green is 100% all go, play defense like you would in a game. So you can come up with your own language around it and just try and explain what that means to your team, I guess, over time. It helps when you coach the same team. Anything else?
Love the traffic light. That's a cool idea.
So that's cool. I think thank you everyone for coming. And yeah, hopefully that was useful.
Petra, are you at Gnome's house?